Imagine yourself lying back, the room around you still and quiet, as the weight of the day begins to melt away. Outside, the modern world hums faintly: electric lights, distant traffic, perhaps the soft buzz of a refrigerator or the ticking of a clock. But now, we're going to set that world aside. We're leaving it behind entirely. Close your eyes, if you wish, and let your mind drift further and further back. Past the tall cathedrals of the Middle Ages, past the columns of Rome, past the chariots of Egypt and the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Back before kingdoms, before writing, before metal was ever shaped by human hands, you are going to the Stone Age. It is not a single place or time, but a vast, slow stretch of human experience. Tens of thousands of years, lives lived in silence. Generations born and buried without names we remember, without monuments to mark their passing. And yet, they were real. They were people like us, and yet not like us. They did not sleep on mattresses or read books before bed. Their nights were filled with the sounds of the forest, the howl of wolves, the hiss of fire, and the slow breath of survival. The Stone Age was not primitive in the way we often imagine. It was complex, challenging, and deeply human. So, tonight, let us gently step into their world. Not as explorers or conquerors, but simply as observers. Let the rhythm of their lives unfold around you. Their struggles, their quiet moments, their endless repetition. There is no need to rush. Time moves differently here. Let us begin with their daily life. The sky is a pale grey when you open your eyes. The air is cool, moist, and rich with the scent of soil and old leaves. You lie beneath a canopy of woven reeds and furs, or perhaps in the shallow mouth of a cave, the stone behind you rough and cool. There is no mattress beneath you, only a thick mat of moss, animal skins, or dry grasses carefully arranged. Your body is sore, not injured, but worn, because comfort, in this world, is fleeting. Outside, the first birds have begun to sing. Their calls are sharp, clear, and instinctive. There is no alarm clock, but the natural world is always on time. You stir not because you want to, but because the group has begun to move. In the Stone Age, sleep was precious, but survival was priority. The fire, if it still smoulders, is now little more than a glow. You see a few older members of the group, those too old to hunt or gather, prodding the embers, feeding them dry twigs with practiced care. Fire is life. It gives heat. It protects. It cooks. There is no coffee, no tea, no kitchen. Hunger, if you feel it, is a constant. Your first thought is, where will today's food come from? You reach for a small blade, perhaps made of flint, smooth on one side, chipped sharp on the other. It was crafted by someone in the group, maybe even by you. Tools are precious. A single lost knife might mean someone starves. You tuck it into a pouch at your waist, tied with twine. The air is clearer now. Morning mist clings to the edges of trees. The world is quiet, but not still. Leaves shift, insects hum. Somewhere in the distance, something large cracks a branch. Is it prey? Is it predator? You don't know yet. The group splits for the day's work. The strongest and fastest go to hunt. Spears are carried carefully long, wooden shafts with stone tips, hardened in fire, tied with sinew. The rest scatter to gather roots, berries, nuts, always aware, always cautious. Children, if they can walk, go too. There is no school, no toys, no playground, but there is always learning. Every step teaches how to listen, how to smell, how to tell good food from poison. The elders do not lecture, they show, and the young watch. If you are near a river, you might wade in. The water is cold, but clean. You scoop out clams, search for fish, maybe even check the traps set the day before. Woven baskets weighted with stones. Lunch, if you find it, is simple. Raw roots, scraped and eaten. Berries crushed in your palm. A small piece of dried meat, shared among many. No spices, no sauces, only sustenance. You notice how much you use your hands. For everything, no forks or knives. You break. You dig, you hold, you build. As the sun rises higher, the day warms. You sweat, you itch, mosquitoes bite, your clothes, if you wear any, are stitched from animal skins. Rough, not tailored, they chafe, but they protect. Sometimes the group moves. Nomadic life is like that. Camps are made and remade. Tents built from branches and hides. Fires ringed with stone. You never stay long. The land provides, but not forever. The afternoon is quieter. If there's a kill, it's butchered carefully. Skin peeled, meat carved, nothing wasted. Even the bones are split for marrow. Fat is saved, tendons dried into cords. The fire hisses with grease, children nap in the shade. The old sit in a circle, murmuring stories. Oral memory is the only library. Every tale passed down is survival knowledge wrapped in rhythm and metaphor. You listen without realizing it. A story about the bear hunt, about the lightning strike that felled a tree, about the spirit in the cave that watches over the tribe. You feel the ache in your muscles settle into something deeper, a constant struggle, not one of epic battles or great inventions, but of repetition. The same needs every day, the same work, the same risks. As evening returns, the shadows stretch long. The group gathers again, faces smeared with dirt and smoke. Hands blistered, eyes wary but alive. The fire is lit stronger now, flames dance. They are hypnotic, comforting, dangerous, sacred. You eat together, quietly. You don't speak much, but you're not alone. The group is everything. You depend on one another. Trust is not a feeling, it's a necessity. Someone hums a song. It has no words. It is old, older than language. A melody of rhythm and time. The stars appear, one by one. You recognize them not by name, but by place. They guide migration. They tell stories. They mark the seasons. You wrap yourself again in fur. You close your eyes. And for a while, there is peace. Not safety, not comfort, but peace. The rhythm of their lives, the silence of their world, and the endless repetition of being human before history even began. We begin not with a name, for there are no names written, no tombs with inscriptions, no scrolls or tablets to preserve the sounds of their lives. But still, we will imagine one. Let us call him Kao, not because that was his true name, but because he represents many. He could have lived 15,000 years ago, or 30,000. He might have walked the frozen steppes of Ice Age Europe, the humid forests of what is now Indonesia, or the sunburned savannas of Africa. Kao was born in a shelter of hides and woven bark, beside a fire that never fully went out. He was born small and weak, his cries thin, his skin delicate. But he was not alone. His mother wrapped him in fur and pressed him to her chest. The women of the group surrounded her not with ceremony, but with practiced care. Birth was frequent and dangerous. Kao's earliest years passed without memory, carried on his mother's back, shaded by her body, fed by her hand. He learned the sounds of the group long before he understood them. Low murmurs, warning grunts, the sudden silence when danger approached. As he grew, Kao crawled through dirt and bone. He learned what not to eat the hard way. He learned what stung, what scratched, what could not be touched. He mimicked those around him. He watched the hands that shaped flint, that bound fibers, that lit sparks with stone. His childhood was not filled with play in the way we know it. There were games, yes, but they were lessons wrapped in movement, throwing sticks, hiding in tall grass, running in silence. These were not just pastimes. They were preparation. By the time Kao could speak clearly, he knew the path of the deer by its droppings. He knew how to spot a snake beneath a rock. He knew that fire must always be respected and never wasted. At 10, he followed the hunters, not to kill, but to watch. His father was one of them, tall, quiet, and scarred. His movements were slow, deliberate, careful. The group moved like shadows, no words, only gestures. A glance, a raised eyebrow, a flick of the hand. The hunt was long, Days, sometimes, they followed trails invisible to untrained eyes. The wind was their ally, the sun their guide. The cold, their constant companion. Kale learned how to track a wounded animal, how to approach without being seen, how to finish the job quickly, without cruelty, but without hesitation. When he killed his first deer, there was no feast, no cheering, only a nod. A small piece of the liver was placed in his hands. He ate it raw, as the others had done before him. A quiet ritual of welcome. He was no longer a boy. Seasons changed. Ice came and went. Kel's hair grew longer. His shoulders broadened. He became a man. He took a mate not through ceremony, but through understanding. They shared food, shared fire, shared warmth. She was strong, quiet, and skilled. Her name is lost, too, but we can imagine her moving through the tall grass, her hands stained with berry juice, her arms cradling their first child. Kale was not a hero. He did not invent fire or slay a mammoth with a single throw. But he was skilled, dependable. He shaped arrowheads so finely that others sought his help. He knew how to twist sinew into cords that would not snap. His words were few, but when he spoke, others listened. One winter, the snow came early. Thick, blinding, bitter, food was scarce. Kale led a group to a distant valley, where deer had been seen the year before. The journey was hard. They lost two along the way, one to a hidden crevasse, one to frostbite too far gone. But Kale persisted. He read the land like a book, found tracks beneath the snow, and when they returned, thin and hollow-eyed, but carrying meat, the group survived another month. There was no monument to his leadership, no story passed in verse, just another quiet success, one of many that held the community together. Years passed. Kel's hair turned grey. His joints ached in the cold. He no longer hunted, but he taught. His hands showed the young how to notch a spear, how to follow the wind. His voice quiet, patience remained steady. One day, he simply did not wake. There was no coffin, no tomb. His body was laid on a raised bed of branches, covered in furs and flowers, facing the sunrise. The group sat around him in silence, not in mourning, as we know it, but in recognition. His work was done. His memory lived in the hands of those he taught, in the tools they used, in the paths they walked. Kel's story, though imagined, mirrors millions. Stone Age lives were not written, but they were lived fully, with struggle, with care, with skill. Each person a link in the unbroken chain of humanity. You would not know Kale if you passed him on the trail, but he was real. And in a way, you carry him with you still, in the shape of your hands, in the instincts you rarely notice, in the fire that warms your home. The Stone Age left no written records, no journals, no scrolls, no painted manuscripts. What remains are traces subtle, broken, buried. And yet, from these fragments, a story still whispers to us across the millennia. A story told by bones, stones, and the careful language of time. Imagine an archaeologist brushing away layers of dirt in a quiet cave. The light is soft. The only sound is the slow rhythm of breath and the delicate tap of a wooden tool. Bit by bit, an ancient truth is uncovered, sometimes a single tooth, a shard of pottery, or a stone blade shaped by hands that vanished 20,000 years ago. One of the oldest mysteries lies in a French cave, Chauvet. Deep inside, hidden from the sun, are images drawn in ochre and charcoal. Lions stalk the walls, rhinos charge, horses run in a rhythmic parade, their shapes hauntingly lifelike. These are not doodles. They are intention. They are meaning. No written explanation survives, and perhaps there never was one. But something in those images tells us that these people thought deeply, that they saw beauty, danger, and story in the world around them. They wanted to remember, or to be remembered. But why these animals? Why in such secrecy, in places only firelight could reach? Some scholars believe these caves were sacred spaces, places of ritual, of dreaming, of connecting with something beyond survival. Perhaps shamans came here to speak to the spirit world, Or perhaps the drawings were gifts for the ancestors, or maps of memory. And always, the silence around them feels deliberate, not ignorance, but reverence. Further north, in the cold earth of Siberia, archaeologists unearthed a burial site known as the Sunjia grave. Two children, perhaps siblings, were laid side by side over 30,000 years ago. Their bodies were adorned with thousands of mammoth ivory beads, carefully carved and sewn into clothing. Their heads rested on fox pelts. Ivory spears were placed beside them. They were young, maybe 10 years old, and yet the care taken in their burial speaks volumes. These children were loved. Their loss was deeply felt. The mourners had no stone church, no hymn, no eulogy, but they left behind time and labor. Beads that would have taken months, maybe years, to make. Why such effort for children who would never grow old? The answer is unknowable. And that is part of the mystery. The Stone Age is not a dark void, it is a softly lit fog, through which we glimpse moments of startling humanity. Even in the humblest tools, there are secrets. A small stone blade might reveal the path of a migration. A bone needle, tiny and curved, tells us they sewed their clothes with care. A shell bracelet found far from any ocean hints at trade routes, or journeys we never imagined. And then there are the burial practices that defy even our guesses. In the caves of Atapuerca in Spain, deep beneath the surface, lie the scattered bones of ancient hominins, early relatives of ours, placed with deliberation into deep shafts. Some believe this was a ritual, a proto-funeral. Others suggest something darker, but the truth remains elusive. Mystery defines the Stone Age as much as stone does. Even their homes are puzzles. Some communities lived in caves cool, dark, stable. Others built shelters of bone and hide, arranged in circles. At sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, mammoth bones were stacked into walls. Fires burned inside. Figurines were molded from clay and fired in kilns long before pottery was common. One of the most famous is the Venus of Willendorf, a small, round figurine of a woman, carved with exaggerated features. She fits in the palm of a hand, yet carries the weight of deep symbolism. Was she a fertility idol, a mother goddess, a symbol of health in lean times? We do not know. But she appears not once, but again and again, across vast distances and cultures. Different forms, same essence. Even music echoes faintly from the past. In caves in Germany, bird bones have been found drilled with Holz flutes. They played something, notes, rhythms, perhaps to calm children, perhaps to dance, perhaps to speak to the stars. And then there is language itself. We do not know what the first words were. We do not know how they sounded. But the evidence of cooperation, of teaching, of planning, suggests language existed. Perhaps as clicks, grunts, tones, perhaps more elaborate. The tongues are lost, but the need to speak, to name, to explain, to comfort was surely there. Each archaeological site is a pause in that deep silence. A place where the unknown leans forward, just slightly, and allows us to peek through. Imagine standing in one of those caves. Your footsteps echo softly, the walls are cool. The smell is old of earth, and fire, and something ancient. You hold a flickering torch and look at a handprint. It is small, pressed there by a person long gone. A child, a woman, a hunter, whoever they were, they stood where you stand. They pressed their hand to the rock and blew pigment across it, leaving behind not an image but a presence. They said, in their own way, I was here, and now, so are you. In our modern world, status is visible: watches, titles, homes, bank accounts. But in the Stone Age, social standing was woven more subtly into the rhythm of daily life. In a small band of foragers or early farmers, one's worth was often measured by usefulness, not through speeches or commands, but through the way others watched when they moved, waited when they spoke. Could you track game through shifting wind? Could you remember the places where tubers grew thick? Could your hands shape tools that endured? And yet, When she begins to hum a story, the children hush. The hunters pause, because her memory is the tribe's memory. In a world where life was short, reaching old age was not only rare, but deeply meaningful. A strong young woman might lead a hunting party. A quiet man, skilled in flint knapping, might be deferred to when crafting blades. Leadership was likely situational, a consensus, not a command. An elder had survived many winters, had seen floods and droughts, had buried kin and raised generations. Whatever the reason, the materials he took to the grave were a message to the living. Not all lives were weighed the same. There were no kings, no castles, no coins. And yet, inequality was not unknown, nor was respect, nor leadership. The patterns were different, but they were there. These structures suggest extended families living together, cooperating, sharing, perhaps deferring to a central elder or family leader. Women gathered, yes, but also hunted, built, and led. Men made tools, but also cared for children. Tasks were shaped by need, by skill, by terrain. Let's begin not with power, but with contribution. Figurines like the Venus statues suggest reverence for fertility, for motherhood, for continuity, but perhaps also for mystery, for strength, for the unseen. The group needed many things to survive: food, safety, knowledge, care. Those who provided these consistently earned quiet reverence. Elders, in particular, held a unique place. Conflict was dangerous. A fractured group could not hunt, could not survive a bad harvest or a cold winter, and so, compromise was likely constant. In how infants were cradled with care, in how broken bones healed, evidence that someone fed and protected the injured long enough for recovery. Disputes resolved through slow talk, or through separation when talk failed. They are human constants, shaped by the brain, not by the age. A child born during a warm spell had a better chance than one born into drought. A family with good flints and access to water thrived more easily than one without. Imagine an old woman sitting beside a fire. Her back is bent, her eyes cloudy. A healer might be a woman with herbs in her pouch and scars on her arms. A shaman might be a man who fasted alone 4 days, returning with a story of dreams. Shells from the sea found their way to inland homes. Remember, though you would not last a day in the Stone Age, because of weakness, but because the demands were constant, you are the product of those who did. These items were not simply beautiful. They were tokens of contact, of exchange, of something beyond mere survival. Most of human history took place before a single word was written down. Before cities, before clocks, it was life lived close to the land, to danger, and to one another. Social roles often grew from age and skill, not wealth or birth. In your quiet moments, in your stories, in your stillness and artificial light, remember the silence that came before. The silence of a cave after the fire dies, the silence of snow falling on a shelter made of bone, the silence of a child learning, watching, waiting. You've met a man with no name, yet a life full of meaning. You've listened to whispers etched in bone and ash. You still carry the memory of fire in your gaze. Let the rhythm of ancient life, the footsteps, the fire crackles, the wind through bare branches settle into the back of your mind. Let the distant drums of your ancestors fade gently into silence. And you've seen how, even in the absence of kings and scrolls, a world full of structure, love, labor, and memory endured. But this is not to say that early humans were always equal. One of lights and language, of schedules and soft beds. The skills needed then were different, not speed, but silence. Not comfort, but resilience. Not information, but instinct. In some communities, especially as farming began and settlements grew, we see the first hints of hierarchy. Burials tell part of the story. In a Neolithic grave in Varna, Bulgaria, dated to over 6,000 years ago, archaeologists found the body of a man buried with more gold than had ever been discovered from that time. Bracelets, beads, and scepters. Nearby, Others were buried with little more than a few tools. Why the difference? It suggests something had begun to shift. Perhaps he was a chieftain, or a priest, or simply someone born into favor. In other places, early farmers built longhouses that could shelter dozens. But what of gender? The Stone Age did not have our modern categories, nor our assumptions. Roles were lightly divided, but not rigidly. In the quiet corners of settlements, traces of ritual suggest women were not only present, but powerful. Spiritual life often mirrored social life, intimate, practical, symbolic. What bound these communities together was not law but necessity. In some places, trade began to shape identity. Beads made of amber traveled hundreds of miles. Obsidian blades appeared far from volcanoes. Perhaps those who traded became respected. Their stories expanded the world. Their hands brought novelty. And yet, most lives remained small in scope geographically, but not emotionally. Love existed. We see it in how bodies were buried together. Jealousy likely existed too, and grief, and pride. These are not modern inventions. In the end, what separated people in the Stone Age was not so much status but situation. And yet, in that balance of hardship and cooperation, of isolation and belonging, of hunger and firelight, Stone Age life found a rhythm that sustained humanity for tens of thousands of years. A rhythm without palaces, without coins, without names carved in marble, but a rhythm that carried us forward. So now as you lie there hearing the soft pulse of time across this ancient earth, they made it. And so, eventually, did you, and so, you return slowly, softly from the world of stone. You've walked barefoot over rough earth. You've felt the cold of morning fires, the ache of long hunts, the hush of ancient caves. You would not last a day in the Stone Age because you are incapable, but because you are shaped by another rhythm. And yet, some part of you remains tethered to that time. You still gather stories, you still seek warmth, you still listen for footsteps in the dark. The Stone Age was not simply a beginning. It was an age of depth, of longevity. Tonight, as you lie in your modern bed, wrapped in woven fabric, you are part of that lineage. The long echo of humanity. Let that thought be comforting, not daunting. You carry them not only in your genes, but in your dreams. Sleep now. If you wish, tomorrow, the modern world will return. But tonight, you shared in something older. Thank you for spending this time here, drifting softly through history. May your sleep be deep, and your dreams ancient. How the first villages changed everything. Your body sink a little deeper now. The air is still. The world outside fades to a quiet hush. You are safe, and warm, and still. We return, gently, to the distant past. But this time, not to a world of wandering. Not to the camps and cold mornings of the deep Stone Age. No, tonight, we step into something different. The moment when people stopped walking. When they laid stones in a circle, not for protection, but to say, this is home. It did not happen quickly. There was no switch from walled to settled, no single fire that stayed lit forever. But slowly, across thousands of years, the rhythm of human life shifted. People stayed longer in one place. They began to plant seeds, to herd animals, to build homes first from branches and grass, then mud and stone. They cooked over the same hearth night after night. Children were born in the same walls where their grandparents died. This is the story of the first villages, before cities, before empires, before roads and rulers. There were clusters of homes, flickering fires, woven baskets, and walls painted with simple hands. And in those early villages, life was no longer just about survival. It was about repetition, routine, rhythm. So let's gently walk into one, a Neolithic settlement, somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago. Let's begin with a day in their life. The sun rises slowly over the flat horizon. There are no chimneys, no plumes of smoke. Just low, square homes made of mud and straw, their walls still damp from the dew of night. You are lying on a bed of packed reeds. The floor beneath you is cool, made of clay smoothed by many feet. Overhead, the ceiling is low and dark. Wood beams hold up a roof of thatch. There is no window. Only a small hole for smoke to drift upward. Beside you, the embers of a fire have turned to ash. The faint smell of wood smoke clings to your skin, and your clothes coarse linen, hand-woven, colored with crushed plants and earth. Someone stirs, not with alarm, but with the slow patience of a day that will look much like the one before it. The home has one room, maybe two. A grinding stone leans in one corner, its surface dusted with fine flour from the day's work before. A jar sits nearby, sealed with beeswax inside. Grain, barley, maybe, or remah wheat. You step outside. The air is still. A few dogs, small, wolfish, but friendly, sniff the ground. Chickens scratch at the dirt, heads bobbing. The village is quiet, but alive. You are in a settlement of perhaps 200 people, maybe less. The houses are close together, clustered like stones in a riverbed. No streets, just pathways, worn by bare feet. Each home has a hearth, a place for food, a place for sleep. Outside, clay pots line the walls, drying in the sun. Some are plain. Others are decorated with soft lines, swirls, dots pressed with sticks or fingers. The day begins with work, but it is not rushed. A woman grinds grain, the rhythmic motion of stone on stone echoing faintly. A child carries a gourd of water from a nearby spring. Two men walk toward the fields, baskets on their backs. The fields are not vast, just cleared patches of land, rough, uneven, full of promise. They plant in simple rows, seeds dropped carefully into shallow trenches, then covered with dirt. No plows yet, no wheels, just hands, sticks, and time. Elsewhere, a man repairs a wall. He mixes mud and straw, slaps it into place, smooths it with care. The home has no door, just a low entrance you crawl through. But inside, it is warm, clean, familiar. The village works together, not in unison, but in rhythm. No bells, no clocks. Just the sun, the seasons, and the knowledge passed from hand to hand. At mid-morning, smoke rises. Someone is baking, flatbread on hot stones. The smell is soft and sweet. A group of women sit weaving reeds, flax, wool. Their fingers move quickly, twisting strands, tying knots. A baby sleeps nearby, wrapped in a cloth sling. There is no writing, but there is memory. Everyone knows what to do. Children roam in small groups. They chase insects, pick up stones, mimic their elders. One boy carves a stick with a flint knife. Another girl helps her mother dip a pot into red ochre and press her hand to the side. Around midday, the sun grows stronger. Work slows. People rest in the shade of walls. They eat from shared bowls, lentils, grain, dried figs, maybe goat's milk. It is simple, but nourishing. There is laughter but soft. There is music but simple, a flute made from a bird's bone. A drum stretched with animal skin. Rhythm is everywhere. The afternoon brings more work. Repairing thatch, mending nets, checking on stored grain. Some men head out with slings and spears, still hunting, even now. Evenings are slower, fires are lit, stories are told. Faces flicker in the golden light. Someone tells of a storm, or a spirit seen in a dream. Someone else hums a song they learned as a child, too old now to remember where it came from. You feel the weight of a day lived without rush. A day shaped not by news, or markets, or deadlines, but by needs, and habits, and care. You return to your home. Curl up near the fading fire. The smoke curls gently upward. Someone adds a twig. You hear a dog settle nearby. The stars rise, quiet, and so ends another day in the first village. A world where everything changed, but slowly. So slowly that no one even noticed. Imagine the early morning air again. The smoke from last night's fire has faded to a soft scent, clinging to hair and clothing. Somewhere nearby, The chickens begin their gentle scratching. A pot clinks softly against another as it's moved in the cool dimness of a small clay-walled home. In this world, we meet someone different. She's not a hunter, not a shaman, not a builder of walls or sower of seeds. Her name has not survived, but we will call her Ayla, for ease and for rhythm. A woman of the early Neolithic, perhaps 9,000 years ago. Her world is small, yet layered with meaning. Her hands are worn, but skilled. Her work is both practical and sacred. Ayla is a potter, and that means she is, in quiet ways, one of the most essential people in her settlement. She lives near the edge of the village, close to the stream. Her home is low, square, and quiet. Inside, bundles of dried reeds hang from the ceiling. Clay dust rests like a soft skin on the packed floor. In the corner is a pile of half-shaped pots, still damp, waiting to dry. Each day begins the same. She wakes with the light not because she must, but because it is her rhythm. The birds stir, the air shifts, the work calls softly. She checks yesterday's parts, runs a thumb along the edge to test for cracks, lifts each one carefully and sets it upright near the doorway where the sun might warm them later. Then she kneels beside a worn stone basin. Here, she mixes her clay. Water drawn by hand from the stream, earth sifted with care. She adds straw, crushed shells, ash, whatever the season provides. The recipe is not written, but remembered. She works in silence. Her fingers press and pull, turning the soft earth into form. Her palms shape walls, her knuckles smooth edges. No wheel, just hands, just time. Each pot takes hours, though it may not seem so. Each one must balance usefulness and beauty. A rim wide enough to scoop, a body strong enough to survive fire. A curve pleasing to the eye. As she shapes, her children sometimes sit nearby. One draws in the dust with a stick, another naps beside the wall. Her daughter watches her hands, trying to mimic the movement. Ayla does not speak, but the lesson is passed all the same. By midday, the sun warms the drying pots. She moves slowly, checking each one. She sets a few aside too thin, or cracked from uneven shaping. They will return to the earth. Nothing is wasted. In the afternoon, she prepares the fire. There is no kill in the modern sense, just a pit dug shallow into the ground. She lines it with shards and old stones, then places the driest pots inside. She adds wood carefully, small at first, then thicker. She waits for the wind to settle. When the flames begin, she tends them, not with tools, but with experience, feeding slowly, fanning gently, listening. The firing takes hours. The heat must be even, the smoke must flow away, not settle. A bad fire means weak parts, or worse, broken ones. As dusk falls, she lets the flames die. The pit glows like a bed of coals. She will not open it until morning. The earth must cool slowly. Patience is survival. That evening, she shares a meal of flatbread and lentils with her family. She eats from a pot she made, drinks from a vessel etched with marks of birds and sun. Her work touches every part of the meal. Later, she sits by the fire with the elders. Someone sings. She hums softly. Her hands, empty now, twitch with muscle memory. She watches the firelight flicker across the village. Shadows dance on mud walls. Dogs stir and resettle. The night wraps them all in stillness. In her lifetime, Ayla will shape hundreds of pots. Most will crack, many will be buried, a few will be passed down. One, perhaps, will survive the centuries, discovered by a modern hand beneath layers of dirt. When that hand lifts the pot into light, sees the thumbprint still faint on the rim, feels the shape of the base, they will ask, who made this? They will never know her name, but her work will answer quietly, I was here. Close your eyes for a moment. Let the weight of the past settle again around you, not as a burden, but as a gentle warmth. The fire in Ayla's hearth has gone out. Her pots are cooling in their pit, and the village hums with the soft hush of sleep. But beneath this simple rhythm, there are older things, quiet things, things buried in the earth. pressed into walls, scratched into stone. This is where we explore the secrets of the first villages, not in legends, but in what they left behind. Take your mind now to Kotolyuk, one of the oldest known towns in the world. Over 9,000 years old, a place without streets, where homes were entered through the roof, where people walked across their neighbors' houses as easily as we step across a garden path. It was not grand. There were no palaces, no towering temples, but it was careful. The walls of Kotolyuk were painted, over and over, through generations, ochre, charcoal, white lime. In some homes, bulls' heads' horns mounted like guardians. In others, leopards, vultures, and human figures with outstretched arms. What did they mean? No one truly knows. The images repeat, but the message is missing. Perhaps the bull stood for strength, or food, or perhaps a spirit. Even more curious, many homes held burials beneath the floor, tightly curled bodies, wrapped in mats. Sometimes alone, sometimes with beads, or tools, or clay figurines. One room might hold 5, or 10, or more. They lived on top of their dead. And yet there was no fear in this arrangement. It seems intentional. The ancestors were part of the home, not hidden away. A foundation, not a memory. Some bodies were later dug up, moved, rearranged. Skulls were separated, painted red, and placed in special niches. To us, this is unsettling, but to them, it was reverence. A connection between the living and the long gone, a cycle, a dialogue without words. Archaeologists have unearthed figurines small, rounded, abstract, often female, seated calmly, sometimes flanked by animals, sometimes giving birth. Were they goddesses, mothers, spirit guardians, symbols of continuity? They appear again and again, shaped in the same style from house to house, passed from hand to hand, not idols of fear, but of care, of fertility, of presence. And then there are the strange objects found hidden in walls. One home held a bundle of tightly tied reeds tucked into a niche. Another, a carved obsidian mirror facing inward. What were they protecting, or hiding, or honoring? Some theorize that each home was a miniature temple, a sacred space in its own right. There were no great religious buildings at Kotolyuk, but perhaps that was because every home carried spiritual meaning. We also find footprints. Yes, literal footprints pressed into drying clay thousands of years ago. One belongs to a child, another to a dog. They walked across a roof while it was still wet. Their moment, accidental and eternal, now seen again under museum glass. In those prints, there is no ceremony, just presence, just proof. Even in artifacts, there are quiet questions. Obsidian blades with no signs of use, ceremonial, perhaps. A bone flute with a snapped edge broken in ritual or by time. A woven basket preserved in dry earth patched many times, used with love. There is no writing to guide us, no epic poem, no myth engraved in stone. And yet the village tells its own story, one of patterns, of slow change, of people living in the same space across generations, shaping their walls, their tools, and their beliefs with soft, human hands. The mystery lies not in a single object, but in their repetition. The same symbols appearing across homes, the same care given to burial, the same choice to paint, to shape, to remember. Perhaps the most haunting aspect is this: for thousands of years, these people lived without war. No weapons of battle have been found. No burned villages, no mass graves. They had conflict, surely. But something about their world was balanced, at least for a time. And in that balance, they built homes and filled them with quiet beauty. So as you lie there now, imagine standing in one of those houses, bare feet on clay, firelight flickering across red handprints, the scent of dried herbs, the low sound of grinding stone. You're not looking at a ruin, you're looking at a life, a belief, a culture that speaks without words. And it says, we were here, we stayed, and we remembered. Even in a world without kings or cities, life had patterns. In these first settled places, low clusters of homes, flat-roofed, smoke-scented, and earth-walled people lived not only side by side, but with one another. And in that togetherness, something subtle emerged. Structure, not in the way we understand it today. There were no laws, no currency, no titles, but day after day, repetition revealed quiet roles. And roles, over time, began to shape identity. Picture a small Neolithic village in the Anatolian plains. Morning arrives, as always, not with a bell, but with the sun's slow light against the clay. Smoke begins to drift from rooftops. A baby stirs, a pot is lifted, and life resumes. You might think everyone did the same thing. And in some ways, they did. Everyone gathered, everyone cleaned. Everyone knew how to cook and craft and tend. But even among equals, certain hands became known. One woman's baskets held together longer than others, her knots never frayed. Another shaped clay with more grace, her pots balanced, her rims even, her symbols precise. A man near the edge of the village was known for his goats. They responded to his voice. They came when he called. It wasn't fame or wealth, it was trust. People began to rely on one another in specific ways. And with that reliance came responsibility. Children grew into the roles they observed. A boy who followed his grandmother to gather herbs would learn the smell of healing leaves. A girl who helped mend roof thatch each spring would one day lead the repairs herself. Gender, in this time, was not a boundary, it was a rhythm. There were patterns, yes, but necessity shaped flexibility. If someone could do the work, they did. But even within those patterns, roles deepened. Some became weavers, others herders. Some remembered planting times, others remembered stories. The elder emerged not elected, but recognized. In every village, there was someone who had simply lived long enough to see the patterns repeat, who remembered the harsh winters, who remembered the spring when no goats were born. Their authority came not from command, but from memory, and from patience, and there were those who watched the sky. The first timekeepers, they marked when the sun stood highest, when shadows grew long, when birds returned. They noticed patterns in stars. Perhaps they could not explain the cosmos, but they saw when things aligned. When it was time to plant, when it was time to wait. They became advisors, perhaps, or guides. They marked transitions not with ceremony, but with observation. As settlements grew, so did cooperation. Walls needed repair, roofs needed thatching, food needed storing. People began to dig shared pits for grain, for firewood, for safety. In time, some began to oversee the storehouses, not rulers, but keepers, trusted with the essentials. Held accountable, perhaps praised, perhaps watched closely. In some larger communities, we find evidence of differentiation. Homes with more space, burials with more beads. It was the faint beginning of hierarchy, not imposed from above, but slowly rising from below. Still, in these early villages, most life was shared. Meals were eaten in small groups, yes, but food was often pooled. Clay ovens outside homes baked bread for many. Children were watched communally. If a mother was sick, another woman nursed the infant. There was no currency, no debt, only memory and mutual need. If one family lost a goat, others shared. If one home's wall collapsed, others came to rebuild. Cooperation was not charity, it was survival. And yet, as homes became more permanent, so did identities. A potter was known as a potter, a hunter as a hunter. And over generations, those identities hardened. The family that tended goats continued to do so. The woman who told stories taught her daughter the same. Over time, the memory of what someone did became the expectation of what they should do. And from that expectation, quiet structure grew. No one wrote laws, but people knew what was fair, what was expected, what was proper. Children knew when to be quiet. Elders knew when to speak. Tools were borrowed and returned. Favors remembered, wrongs forgiven or not. In this stillness, we also see the first roots of inequality. In a burial, one child has beads, another has none. One home stores grain in jars, another scrapes by. Not always, not everywhere. But sometimes, the seeds of more were sown. But so too were the seeds of together. Even in the presence of difference, the village still hummed as one. People still slept near each other, still relied on each other, still faced the same sun, the same hunger, the same rain. Social life in the first villages was not about titles or classes. It was about time and trust, and the soft expectation that every person, in their own small way, kept the world from slipping apart. And so, you close your eyes again, picture the village by torchlight. A figure walks across the rooftops, stepping over sleeping homes. A dog lifts its head, then settles again. Somewhere, a pot calls in its pit. No laws, no crowns, no monuments, but life carried forward. And in that quiet cooperation, civilization began.